Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole. This is another one of our congressional chats. Congress has been a pretty busy place, partly because the world has been a pretty tumultuous place in the last few weeks since we visited. Obviously, everybody by the time you see this will be aware of the American strike at Iranian nuclear facilities. We literally just had an intelligence brief for the entire House of Representatives this morning about that. I can't go into great detail because it is a classified brief, but I can tell you several things. Number one, not much question, and both American and Israeli intelligence agree on this, that Iran was awfully close to getting nuclear capability. Number two, not much doubt that the strike was incredibly well planned, well executed. It's just a reminder, obviously, to the entire world about what the capability of the American military is. When the president and others say no other military could have done this, they are absolutely correct in that. And the range of resources and capabilities that it took. It'll take some time to know how far we set the Iranians back, but certainly Israeli intelligence, and this has been released, so I'm not telling you anything that you shouldn't know. The Israelis estimate at least 7 years in terms of destroying infrastructure and capability that they would need. We'll have a more precise estimate over time. It takes time. Obviously, we're trying to evaluate something that occurred in a foreign country where we don't necessarily have people on the ground, and we're doing a lot of this through what is called signals intelligence. That is things, communications that you can detect, amongst your adversaries, obviously from, space satellites and things like that, and our own intelligence capabilities, and then we have partners and allies in the region. The reason why I mentioned Israeli intelligence is I would put a high stock in what they have to say. I think they've demonstrated in recent weeks how effective they are, certainly within their own region. So that's a pretty extraordinary thing, and I think it's changed a lot of things around the world. As you noticed, President Trump shortly after that had what I would call a very triumphant conference with the NATO countries who have decided they're going to listen to him, that they have not been carrying enough of the military share of the Western Alliance burden, and we're seeing commitments to raise their expenditures. And to be fair, they have been doing that for the last couple of years, really probably partly because of the Russian incursion into Ukraine, invasion. I shouldn't say incursion, it's an invasion. But it's created some strain, but it's brought the old NATO alliance closer together too. It's expanded it by 2 new nations, Sweden, Finland. So anyway, dangerous world, but one where I think we've had an example of decisive leadership by the president, one where one of our adversaries, and I think honestly one of the truly evil regimes on the planet, Iran is the largest sponsor of state terrorism. We've seen it systematically degraded by Israeli activity and now by American participation and the destruction of nuclear capabilities by Iran. And that's an important message, not just for the Iranians, honestly, it's an important message to all of America's adversaries around the world about both American capabilities and the willingness of this administration to use them decisively when it feels like it needed to. I think there's some doubt since the debacle in Afghanistan about the will of the American people and of the American administration to use the tools that were available to secure our own protection and work with our allies. I think there's a lot less doubt about that around the world, and that's actually a good thing. So that has colored everything up on the Hill, and it's a very important thing to note. The second thing I want to visit with you about is where we are in the appropriations process. That's just the day-to-day operation of governance. That's what I do as chair of appropriations. There's 12 bills that do that. We've gotten 5 of them out of committee so far, over half the total spending, because it includes things like the defense appropriations bill, like the Homeland appropriations bill, like the Veterans Administration Military Construction Bill. Those three alone are over half the total spending of the Appropriations Committee. I mean, defense being the biggest single component. So we're moving along at a pretty good clip. The Senate still has not gotten any bills out of committee, but they will start moving probably in the last half of July. And hopefully we can have an agreement between the two chambers. And this has to be a bipartisan agreement as well, because in the Senate we have to get to 60 votes. There's only 53 Republicans, so you can't deal them out of the equation. Hopefully we can come to an agreement in late September to early October to not only keep the government funded at current rates, but a deal that allows us to move money around between departments and things like that. We weren't able to do that last year, and that creates some very serious problems, particularly in the defense agency. But I would tell you, again, good progress out of committee, and this week we actually got the Veterans Military Construction Bill across the floor of the House. It's the first appropriations bill in either chamber to actually move through the legislative process. So again, would I like to be moving faster? I absolutely would. But Congress has been pulled in a lot of different directions. Brand new administration coming in. The president's budget has been delayed. We still don't have the full budget. That makes it very hard to write an appropriations bill. And we've had, obviously, these series of crises outside the country that distract lawmakers and distract and disturb the process. But again, I can report very good progress. Again, 5 out of committee, that's all been basically this month, so we're moving. Last thing I want to talk about is the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which really is the guts of the Trump agenda. It's got multiple component parts. If you remember from the last time we had talked, everybody focuses, probably rightly in a personal sense, on the tax component. This would make the 2017 Trump tax cuts permanent. We think that's very important for certainty and for long-term economic growth. It would add new tax reduction components that the president campaigned on: no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, reduced tax for Social Security recipients, particularly below a certain income level. If you're rich, if you're Warren Buffett, you're probably not worried about your Social Security tax, but if that's all you've got, or that's the primary source of your retirement income, it is a big deal. So these are tax cuts really designed to help working people and to help people that maybe don't have the security or means they would like to have, take a little pressure off them, help them deal with the inflation, honestly, that they've experienced in the last 4 years during the Biden administration. So there's the tax component. The next thing there is, and very controversial, is a measure of reform of our entitlement system. Focus heavily on Medicaid. That the important thing to remember is nobody that should be on Medicaid will be removed from Medicaid. But we do have folks that are legally in the country, illegal immigrants that get Medicaid, and we do have people that don't really qualify it but have sort of gamed the system. And to be frank, we have states, because they only have to pay 10% of the cost of Medicaid expansion, which Obamacare put in, that have not been very vigilant about keeping an eye about who they're adding. So that will save billions of dollars over a decade. The estimates in the House version of the bill, and the Senate's working on it now, are about $1.4 trillion. And that helps finance the tax cuts, but more importantly, it helps stretch out the lifespan of Medicaid, and in particular by not taking so much money out of the trust funds that help sustain them. So that's a big portion of it. Then there's a major portion for defense. We think defense has been underfunded. There's capital requirements. We were all very proud of what the American military did in the strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities. Most Americans don't have any idea that those B-2s are over 20 years old. And the fighters protecting them, other than F-35s, are also over 20 years old. So you need to recapitalize it. We're facing a Chinese Navy that is now larger than our own and is concentrated in the Western Pacific. There's a lot of money for shipbuilding. If you live in Oklahoma, and where we overhaul the entire bomber fleet, every B-52, every B-1, every B-2 comes through Tinker Air Force Base every several years to get a complete overhaul and upgrade. But we're also preparing for the new B-21, which is America's next bomber. It's in testing now, probably be being deployed. You'll probably see them at Tinker Air Force Base in the late 2020s, not that far from where we are right now in 2025. So that's going to take a major upfront investment. So that's a third part of this bill and the present round. And finally, securing the homeland. There's about 170 billion spaced over 4 years for homeland security. That's everything from the wall to additional detention space. So when they catch somebody illegal, they don't have to release them. They actually have a place to detain them before they deport them. Additional Border Patrol agents. I have to say, you have to give the president and the administration, whether you like them or not, enormous credit for securing the border in record speed. I don't know how they've done it this fast. I never saw an estimate that suggested they would be able to do what they've done in a matter of months. We've gone from one of the most porous borders in the world to one that is probably more secure than it's ever been. But they're going through a lot of resources to do that. This would let them sustain it and continue operation. We do know, I was actually listening to an interview of the Chief Enforcement Officer of ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, this morning, and he made the point, remember the 20 million or so people that entered the country illegally during the Biden years, 2 million of them are gotaways. That is people that we don't know who they are. We just know they came through, they avoided detection, they did not try to plead asylum, they're just here. And there's a portion of those that are on the terrorist watch list. The gentleman in question was actually talking about, the focus on Iranian terrorists. They've caught 16 or so, one of whom was like a sniper in the Iranian army. That's happening right now. These are real live people that are inside our country that we don't know who they are, why they're here, but it's probably not because they're just fleeing from oppression. These are folks, again, that more likely to be involved in either criminal activity or, God forbid, a terrorist activity. So, again, there's a component of this bill that doesn't. The House has already passed the big, beautiful bill. So it's over in the Senate now, but the way our system works, unless the Senate passes the identical bill, which is not likely, they'll have to, we'll have to meet again as a House. And we barely got it through the House. We got it through with 2 votes to spare in a period where there were 2 Democrats seats that were vacant, quite frankly, sadly because of death, but if they'd been here, we'd probably had a tie vote and the bill wouldn't have passed. So in this case, we need to stick pretty close, in my view, to the House bill. But again, the Senate's the Senate. It can do what it wants to do. There's enormous pressure on them to try and get this done by July 4th. There's a guy at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue named Donald Trump that wants to sign it on that day. And he's a pretty good closer. So we'll see what happens literally over this weekend. And I would expect there's a possibility of congressional action next week, which would normally be the July 4th break in Congress. But I would be surprised if we're not voting on something next week. So there's a lot of scrambling here at the last minute, try and get agreements between the House and the Senate on text, try to finalize things, try to nail down those last elusive votes in both chambers, which is, I'm sure, what the president will be engaged in over the weekend and in the several days after that. So, a lot going on. So, looking ahead, dangerous world still, and but we saw, I think, the United States take the kind of decisive action that made it a little bit safer. Appropriations process, which is day-to-day governance, not where I'd like it to be, but a lot further along than it was a couple of months ago, and broadly moving in the right direction, coming to agreement, moving bills through. And then finally, the centerpiece of the Trump agenda, if you will, what he literally ran for president on, is likely to be addressed in the next week or two. The goal is always July 4th. Wouldn't surprise me, Washington being Washington, if that slipped a little bit, but it needs to get done by the August break, that is by the end of July. And if it could get done sooner, that would be better. And so we're working hard on that. I know members in our delegation are working very hard on that. We've got key players on the tax front, and Kevin Hearn, who's on the Ways and Means Committee that handles taxes, and James Langford, who's on the Finance Committee, which is the counterpart to that. Obviously, on the Appropriations side of it, Stephanie Bice and I are on the Appropriations Committee. Mark Wayne Mullen is on the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, and also has emerged as a key player back and forth. And you can go around and look at the rest of our delegation. Frank Lucas is always the leader on agricultural products, and Josh Burkeen is heavily involved in Homeland Security. So our delegation is surprisingly well positioned to be playing critical roles in all of this, and I'm awfully proud of how hard they're working and how well they're doing. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful July 4th. It's a day to remember why we're all so fortunate to be Americans, and reflect back on those flyers and maintainers that gave the United States military the ability to do something no other military could do. And believe me, the world and the region are certainly better off the further away Iran is from a nuclear weapon. I think we're very blessed to have an administration, a president that would act decisively to do that. They knew they were going to get criticized for it, and we are very blessed to have an American military that could get something like that done and do it in a way with minimal loss of life, no loss of American life. Matter of fact, they weren't shot at coming in because they didn't see them coming, and they didn't know anything had happened until they were gone. That's a pretty extraordinary group. So again, enjoy the freedom that generations of Americans have fought for to give us with your family and your friends this next week, and look forward to visiting with you again soon.